welcome to the Sheila Rising podcast. How's it going? Good morning.
Hey, Jay. Good.
Good.
Really good. Thanks.
Yeah, I have my chai latte ready to go, and it's been fueling me for the past hour, so I'm very happy about that.
I've done my 5-hour shot, so I'm good to go.
That's awesome. That's really great. So Sheila Rising podcast is here to talk about all the things that Sheila Rising has and things that we're doing. I know that Metis is the new kind of thing we're unveiling to the world soon, and we can get into specifically what Metis is, and you can give an overview of that. But One thing to kind of set the context for this conversation is this week was National Suicide Prevention Week. It was from the September the 5th to September 11th. And it's such a thing that needs to have more of a spotlight put on it. And from my perspective, I was just listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan about Anthony Bourdain and how much it rocked his world when he left. And it's just the sorrow of how suicide takes so many things away from the world. And we can't even begin to imagine the impact of just one soul being gone and the impact they could have had and just the butterfly effect. Really, it's all about the butterfly effect of one thing moving into the next. So, Sheila, if you wouldn't mind just giving the audience just a little bit of a preview of why Sheila Rising is presenting Metis and what Metis is all about in a small little nutshell, and we'll go from there.
Well, that's a great way to introduce this, Jay. The first thing is that Metis is our brand of intramuscular ketamine. And ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic that has several properties that are really unique in application to what we're talking about here with suicidality. In a 2019 study, it was one of the interventions that could actually change outcome of suicidal ideation. And there are about 800,000 a year who die worldwide from suicide. Mm-hmm. So it's a topical subject. But the main thing is that the Metis, ketamine, is an intervention that may have more impact than we could ever imagine, but nobody is studying this. Mm-hmm. So Metis is the goddess of wisdom in the Greek tradition, and the reason I think that we've approached it this way is that ketamine is one thing. That's a drug. Yeah. There is a consciousness, though, that goes with not only the medication, but who's administering it and how it's received. And so I think that container is the thing that we're looking at, trying to help people to see and understand. This is more than just coming and giving you a medicine. This is not a B12 shot. This is a very serious consciousness changing experience. And that's I think that the thing that I have the greatest hope around is that people can feel this. And it's not me. It's not about me. And really it's not about the patient as well. It's about me, the medication, and the patient within a healing vessel. And so it's useful in quite a few things. Depression, which is difficult to control depression, PTSD, and this suicidality is a really important aspect of what we're offering.
Yeah, well, there's two things that brings up. The first thing I want to get into is, as a physician, there's a term that sounds archaic now, bedside manner. That I remember my grandparents and even parents saying it was all about your doctor and their bedside manner. How a doctor knocking on your door when you times of trouble and they would help you. These old, what seem antiquated ideas, and with the pandemic pushing us more and more into Zoom calls, more and more disconnected from one another. in many ways, from the workplace to even our home, where we really have to, some people or I have to isolate if somebody has the sniffles. It's just, there's a sense of fear. And in the whole idea of bedside manner seems to have gone away. Nobody even knows about that anymore. Nobody knows what it's like to be taken care of from the medical community or from a physician. And can you talk to a little bit to that? Because I liked what you said, how it's not just a vitamin D shot. This is something more. There's a consciousness to it that you're trying to bring together. And I think it goes back to the old idea of bedside manner and what that means.
Well, Jay, really a good point. I finished my master's in depth psychology here recently, and Carl Jung was a physician. He was a psychiatrist, but he did some of the initial studies. He and Ford both on transference and countertransference, and that's just what the physician brings and what the patient brings.
Yeah.
And there's a cross link, and that's what I think that we fail to realize, is that we all bring to any situation, but especially in that sacred container between physician and patient, there is constellated this exchange, and that is a transitional process. So what I've come to realize is that anytime that I go into a person's home, anytime that there's anything involved with touch and close contact, there is a container formed in which there is an exchange of more than just words, more than knowledge. It's a consciousness that is constellated by me and the people that we treat. So, one, it's incumbent upon the physician to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. Two, the intention that one approaches the bedside is important. And three, making sure that one is aware of what the patient offers, and being cognizant of that's very important. I spent some time in Uganda. Mm-hmm. We built a hospital and helped folks there. Typically, whenever we would have clinic, and this was in pre-COVID days, the main thing is how do you greet people?
Sure.
And so someone suggested, okay, do what you normally do. I shook hands with each one of those people, and it broke down the barriers. We didn't speak. I had a translator.
Yeah.
But it broke down some barrier, and so there I was speaking a different language in a foreign country.
Sure.
And what was able to link us was this exactly what you've talked about: bedside manner, transference, countertransference.
Wow.
And it constellates a healing pattern.
Yeah, this may be one of the first times I've ever heard of taking what's now become just a metaphor of bedside manner and what it stands for, and actually bringing that into actual fruition and reality. There's literally bedside again in your home. Just make sure I'm not misspeaking. This intervention to suicidality with ketamine and depression and anxiety is done in the patient's home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
It is. Now, Jay, how do we get there?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the thing.
Yes, exactly.
And, the question that people have, okay, well, fine. How do you get to that spot?
Yes.
And I think that dives right into talking about suicide and suicidality.
Yeah.
Is that it's a pandemic.
See, I'm glad you said that, because imagine... Well, obviously we did imagine the pandemic happened and there wasn't a vaccine in sight, and there was panic. We didn't know what was going on. There was confusion all around and everywhere. And with suicidality, I believe there's a whole swath of our community all across the country that is dealing with the same kind of panic, confusion, and no hope. There's no vaccine against suicide, as I've heard.
That's a great idea and a way to frame that, Jay. I think one misconception that people may have and I'm certainly no expert, but I'm becoming more of an expert and
Sure.
being drawn into this in a way that I never imagined when we first started out. But the main thing is that suicidality, self-interest behavior, is not typically about dying. Typically, what they found with the studies is that it's a matter of pain.
Wow.
And an intolerance to a point at which a level's reached where people just can't deal with pain anymore. And that, as opposed to the actual prospect of dying, of losing one's life,
it's more of a relief.
Is more of a relief, exactly.
Wow.
And so that's why I say that there is a possibility to intervene even until the last moment when somebody actually does the act of self-harm to create death. So there is a chance for intervention even up to and including that point. And Metis works perfectly in that exact crease, in that it creates a separation point between the ego that is making all these judgments about how difficult things it is, and separates that in a conscious way from the rest of what we're aware of. So there's a separation from ego and consciousness.
Wow.
So it gives one just a small delta to work in order to see things in a little different light.
Yeah,
so it gives us some opportunity to intervene.
That's great. I think you prompted a thought in me, in that how in almost every vehicle there's problems and solutions, and a lot of times to solve a particular problem you have to find out where the pain point is, and we've used that over and over in engineering to social problems that are happening. Is find the pain point and you'll find the solution. And I think that from my naive, before we got together and been doing projects together, my naive understanding of suicide had always been this: well, some external force is causing this person a lot of anxiety, grief, and pain, so we should focus on getting rid of whatever external source is from that person. And it was very much a mechanical idea of get rid of the external thing that's causing somebody pain. Maybe the people around you, maybe it's your job, or maybe it's life. But you bring up a good point. If the pain point is actually the ego, if the pain point is inside of you, there's no escaping that. I never understood. Now I'm finally getting the horror of not being able to escape something that's causing you pain that's coming from an internal source. That can be, just fills me with panic just to even think about that.
Well, it's a beautiful way to frame things, Jay, and it allows people, I think, to see exactly what we're talking about. The ego, which has a function in our psyche, is able to order things on a day-to-day basis. It helps us decide what we're going to eat, who our friends are, all sorts of helpful things. But once it overextends itself, then and enlarges, is enlarged, is inflated, then it begins to occupy a lot of different areas that it wasn't invited into. Somebody once gave me the picture that think of the ego as an orchestra leader.
Sure.
So
yeah.
as long as you're in the performance, that's wonderful.
Everything's in sync. Everything is in harmony.
Yes. But once you get the ego outside and it thinks that it runs the universe, that's when we get into our trouble. Yeah,
there also reminds me of being a filmmaker and working with audio and audio engineering, the idea of feedback. When you have a guitar next to an amplifier or a microphone next to another microphone, you get this horrible feedback loop where it's just going over and over again until it gets to this resounding thing that wants to break your brain apart because the sound is just so... because it's locked in a loop. So would you say with that thing that everybody can almost everybody in the audience has heard microphone or feedback where it just does, it's this ear-piercing sound that you want to get away from.
Yep. Yes.
This whole idea of the ego in some kind of dissonant loop causing pain in some way.
Yep.
And how do we break that feedback loop that's happening in the ego and in somebody's mind that is causing pain? So could you go a little bit into how the Metis treatment might break that ego loop, that pain oscillation that's happening in people?
Well, good question. First of all, what studies are showing about suicidality is that it's not one thing; it's many things.
Oh, got it.
And so there's no one underlying metaphor. There's no one cause. For instance, in my own experience, I have suicide all through the family, close relatives that have chosen that. And I can tell you, the bullet keeps on traveling.
Wow.
That's the thing that I can tell you is that for every person that commits suicide, the studies show there are over 100 people that are affected directly.
Wow. Yeah,
and
I can see that.
Think of the parents, the children, of people that are left behind. Now, the first thing is that it appears that suicide involves many different pathways in the brain. So it's not just one pathway that could be controlled. Otherwise, some of the antidepressants that have been used for decades would be most helpful in that. They're not. So it appears that suicidality has several, maybe multiple pathways that are involved as far as being activated. So it's not just what's going on in the brain. There's something more global than that. And fortunately, Metis, ketamine, has an effect on multiple pathways in the brain. The NMDA aspartate receptors were thought to be where it affected the most. We know that it's more than that now.
Sure.
So the main thing is that there are multiple pathways within the brain. There are multiple causes consciously to lead to suicide. And Metis is able, it seems, to have an effect that improves all of that in a very short period of time.
Wow. And just to close off this little segment here with Sheila Rising and Metis, I want to talk about telltale signs before people get to the whole idea of suicidality. There, in my kind of naive brain, I think there has to be a sign that happens before. Like, what are the steps that people have seen before a person gets to the point where they're in this suicidality mentality? Is it like anxiety? What are some of the telltale signs that happen that some people might be aware of? You know what? I might want to get some help here.
Jay, I think the main take home is there's no way to tell.
Wow.
Actually, the studies show that people sometimes, when it appears that they've crossed over a big hurdle,
sure,
something that kept them depressed, and all of a sudden they felt better, family said, I thought they were over there.
Yeah.
That's when they may be most prone. My suggestion is, if there is any question at all, the main thing is that it's a dirty secret. And people said, I wish that I would have said.
Yes.
And what we do know is that any conversation that brings it to consciousness can be helpful. And one never knows what someone's pain level is. And it may take just the garbage not being taken out.
Yeah, get it.
Tips that point. So I would just say that if there is anyone, family, friends, anyone else that you even have an idea that might be contemplating that as a route of action, ask them. and say, listen, I don't know, but, and I'm here.
Yeah.
And sometimes that may be all that it is. But I think that it's important if one even considers that this might be an action to bring it up with the person that you're worried about. I think that's the take home from my perspective.
Oh, well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheila, for spending some time and kind of talking to us about really acknowledging National Suicide Prevention Week. I'm so glad that Sheila Rising is offering Meetups now as a way to at least start the conversation about this.
Yes.
And suicide. I think it's a very powerful thing that needs to be discussed further. I think in some of our later episodes that are coming up, we're going to talk specifically about the Metis experience step by step. Another 20-minute episodes where we can talk to a person who's maybe considering this or considering this for somebody they really care about, so they can know what to expect in detail from what's happening. And I think that probably should be the next thing that we discuss. I think it'd be really great. So if you're free, I think we should make another little recording.
Okay, Jay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.